Not that you have to bet the Panthers again next year, but
Right.
that maybe you'll find yourself, with a little, because everyone's going to be back for the most part, right? Like Maurice is definitely going to
Sure.
be back. You'd expect Bob to be back. Kachuk will be
Some
back.
of the defensemen,
Barkov will
they
be
got to
back.
reorganize. They got to pay Reinhardt. I think that's one of the things they have to do, right? Or
This
not
is how
pay
you
him.
know. This is
Right.
how you know Ken's in on the
Yeah,
Florida
we're
Panthers.
restructure Brandon Montour's contract. Got to create some more cap space. Yeah,
By the way,
fine.
Brandon Montour should have won Conn Smythe for stopping McDavid from
Oh
scoring with
man,
like
he
6
saw more
minutes
shots
left.
than Bobrovsky did.
Honestly,
that
that was all Montour. We'll talk about Conn Smythe, but do you think this will extend into next year? Where again, you could bet against the Panthers, but maybe you'll find yourself saying, you know what, I'm going to root for this. You find yourself rooting for them next year.
I know it's funny, right? That this is the first time this has kind of ever happened to me, and this is what I was telling my wife when we were talking about it. I go, it's going to be crazy. I go, it's going to be really, really crazy when I probably have to pretend they're my mortal enemy next year when I bet on whoever we end up betting on to win. Panthers will invariably be a part of the conversation, as will Edmonton for sure. Two of them co-favorites basically for next year's Stanley Cup. I'm not going to bet on them just because I'm a fan, obviously. But yeah, like I'll kind of always have a soft spot for them. It's pretty crazy. And no other title winner I've had so far in this kind of brief stretch we've been doing this work, say a year and a half, 2 years, that's kind of all it's been, have never had an experience like this with the team. It's very fun. It's also much different. It was a great ride. Hopefully it was a great ride for everybody else too.
Well, I thought it was pretty good, and we thread the needle. Panthers and McDavid. It was pretty good.
If you're looking for next year's Stanley Cup winner, and we talk about this all the time with making teams win the title in a series of steps. You never make a big step to win the title. You make a small step to win the title. I think last like 20 years, something like that, however far back I went, nobody has won the title being negative in this score the year before they won. So what does that mean? The winner for next year was probably at least pretty good this year. They were probably average or slightly above average, or maybe they were really good. But it probably isn't going to be somebody, you don't just flip a switch and win the Stanley Cup, just like you don't flip a switch and win the Super Bowl, and you don't flip a switch and win the NBA Finals.
Can I give an example here, Ken? Because Mike Brown has the odds on the right on the right rail for people that aren't watching. The Devils are 13-1. Obviously, I had some injuries last year. They have a new coach, but like missed the playoffs last year. Is that a team you'd want to like cross off because of that?
Yeah, sure.
Because of what happened last year?
I can literally. I'll just go to Hockey Reference and get their SRS for last year. But if fundamentally I would be thinking the right way about like who I would not want. I have it right here. The Devils last year were negative .22. They can win the Stanley Cup. They'd be the first one in decades to take that big of a step forward. You want to frame it that way. It's a good way to think about it. Everybody else on the list, I think, is going to be rated really strongly. Edmonton and Florida are very obvious. Florida was rated in this metric, I think, like the best team in the league going into the playoffs. Dallas was really good. Carolina, ton of turnover, but they'll probably be pretty good again. Colorado, same thing. So yeah, Jersey would be a good one. You could use like miss the playoffs and you'd come up with kind of the same list. I think the Penguins won the Cup one time, missing the playoffs the year before, but you get the idea. It just goes back to kind of like a fundamental rule about titles, which is that, having a team that's good enough to win a championship in any sport, basically, college or pro, is about making like a series of incremental steps forward into the year where you win the title. You can't do it all at once. It's acquiring all the talent, getting the right coach, getting the star player in the prime of their career when they're ready to win titles, or more than one star in the prime of their careers. Like, it takes a lot of time to move that along, and it usually doesn't happen overnight. And so if you're looking at next year, I think broadly, and unless there's like 75 amazing trades that benefit one of these bad teams, I'd take a look at all those negative scores, and I would just automatically draw a big X through all of them. And now you got half the league, at least. So your first step is complete in terms of who you're looking at for next year. And then of that half, who do you think can take a reasonable step forward, thinking about all the things that make teams good in the Stanley Cup playoffs? How good is their goaltending? How good is their depth? Do they have star players of some caliber? Even guys like Kachuk and Barkov. It doesn't have to be Connor McDavid. You start doing that, and then, honestly, I won't make my bets until the Stanley Cup playoffs start next year. I bet all my Florida at the start of the playoffs. Didn't bet anything during the season, basically. So you can wait until then. But just if you wanted to think about it and just be like, hey, the market just came out. What do you think? I think you're looking for a team that's not coming from way off the pace, just like every other sport. And I think it's just something that, try to just teach people how we think about stuff, or how I think about stuff. If you have an award market and, you have a choice between believing your own opinion about what you should bet or believing the people who actually vote's opinion on what you should bet, You should always pick the people whose vote actually counts, whose opinion actually matters for who's going to end up winning the award. And it had been pretty clear and on the record and kind of documented that there was a lot of interest in giving Connor McDavid this award very early in the series. I mean, even after Game 4, the whispers started about, like, man, he's been really good, and the Panthers don't really have somebody, and Bobrovsky just allowed whatever it was 5-6 goals before he'd been pulled for Anthony Stolarz in that Game 4. There was an 8-1 the final score, something like that. So it had that. I mean, it started then, this talk about McDavid, and you go into the next game. Okay, Game 5, obviously Panthers at home, they close a big favorite. Oilers win again. Bobrovsky's bad again. McDavid's awesome again, the best game he played in the series, and then the whispers became shouts, and to in that moment, especially if you're someone who bets, to in that moment be like, well, who cares what they think? I don't think McDavid should win. Like, I hope everybody can see the foolishness in that kind of thinking and how you're costing yourself from making good bets in that situation. Your sole focus, I mean, this is why sometimes I think there are people in the space who like kind of almost brag that they don't watch sports and they do really well betting sports. And I actually think this is a situation where like they're right, where it's almost like not thinking you're all that and not thinking you know anything is helpful because you don't have any biases. You're not like, well, I know a lot about sports and I think Connor McDavid should. It would be like, you got to get that out of your brain, man. We did this
last week, right?
Yeah.
We did this last week on the show where I said, look, and I think people, the audience can feel this way because you're watching the show, like you like sports, right?
Sure.
We
love
if
sports.
You put me in, sports is it's been my favorite thing since I was little.
Yeah.
If you put me in a
Your mic cut out, Nick. I think you muted because you like sports so much. I think you're muted because you like sports so much. Did you hit a button? That's what Nick liked sports so much that he ended up. All right, we'll get to reconnect. I think you liked sports so much that you. It's like let me tell you how much.
How's this?
Yeah, you're good. You're back. Yeah.
Okay, great.
How you doing?
What I was gonna say is, you put me in a room with 99 other sports fans. It's gonna be May, and you know what? Right. Great. And I could know more about sports than anyone. It doesn't mean like you can win you can win. Just because you know so much about sports.
Or you should bet off like all the things that you know.
100%. And look, it's a lesson that took me 20 years to learn. 20 years of betting to learn. I think it's really interesting when you start to think about it like that. It's not that your opinion can never be right. Of course you can be right about stuff, but probably best to bet like candidly, it's really fun to bet like that. I don't know if it's like you really want to make money if it's the best way to bet. I think it's probably the worst way to bet.
Like, oh, well, like, nobody knows more than me, or nobody watches more games than me, or like, I know, so even you listen to us, be like, oh, I know more than they do about sports, like, I can win betting.
Well, no, you don't.
It's just like a different skill set. Like, yeah, we both go on Sports Jeopardy, you could smoke me. Like, I mean, sure, of course, no problem. Would freely admit that, but that's not really the exercise. So, and I'll actually spin this to something else in a second. So with awards, just be really careful about, well, I think this. The longer my kind of rule of thumb is, that's okay early in the season because the voters have no idea what they're going to do at that point. So the only thing you have is kind of your internal compass about what voters tend to value, what they tend to vote for. Sure, some of you subjectively is going to get into that thought process. I think that's okay. The more that you do it, the more you understand what voters like to go for when they vote for stuff. I think that's okay. The later a series, a season, a postseason, a Stanley Cup final, the later it gets, the more it needs to only be about seeking out information. It only needs to be about, okay, like the time for the voters to make their decision has come. What have they decided, or what are they thinking about? What are they between option-wise? And it seemed pretty clear from what was being reported that especially as the series went on, I think early on there was a lot of confusion about, we did this, Bobrovsky or Barkov, with the Panthers up 3-0, like who would really win if the Panthers won. It would have been interesting to see it play out that way, knowing that Barkov got every single second place vote, and I know Bobrovsky was bad in a couple of games. Barkov didn't do anything in the series, and he still got all the second place votes. I think that was kind of interesting.
Who do you think would have won?
A bullet point. I think Barkov would have won, and I think it would have been close. I think Barkov would have won. But I think it would have been really close.
Tough to disagree with that after seeing what the ballots were. I'll slightly give Bobrovsky. So Bobrovsky allows like one goal in Game 4 and they win. I think it's Bob.
Yeah.
But like
I think it's really close.
It's a fun debate. Yeah.